Oh, Mr. Gallagher?
Here.
Mr. Greenspan?
Here.
Mr. Germana?
Here.
Mr. Harrison?
Here.
Ms. Conwell?
Here.
There is a quorum.
Public comment?
No, Mr. Chair, no one is signed in.
In your packet, you received the January 5th meeting minutes. If they're in order, I'll accept the motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Thank you. Resolution 2016-0019.
Resolution number 2016-0019, authorizing an amendment to master contract number CE 1500260118 for traditional residential treatment services for the period 2/1/2015 through 1/31/2017, to change the scope of services effective 1/12/2016, to change the total amount not to exceed from $3,571,147.73 to $8,464,245.03.
Thank you. And how could it be sunnier with the sun shining off the snow and glistening? Could it possibly be sunnier? Is there any way it could be more sunny? Ah, Miss Lippman.
You know what, it was sunny. It always is.
Well,
There is a cloud.
God's country.
Are they saying that you brought the sun? Is that what they're saying?
It's coming.
It follows me wherever I go.
I
Except for last week when I was in Florida and it was overcast and rainy the whole time.
well,
but
you were out of the district, therefore it didn't count.
It didn't count.
But here it bounces off the gleaming snow and onto you and brightens our day. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. How are all
Will
you?
melt some of my snow.
What do we have here?
Karen Lippman with Juvenile Court. We have our master contract for our residential treatment services. This is an amendment to the existing contract. And we are adding some funds for the second year of funding for it, as well as, if you remember, we have two master contracts for residential services. One is what we call traditional services, and one is our youth and family community partnership services. So what we're doing is we're actually taking the services from the youth and family community partnership and really adding it, so we just have one big master contract for all of our residential services. That way, it just gives us the maximum amount of flexibility in funding depending on what services youth need at any given time. So what we're doing here is adding some funds. The new 2016 budget, funds that were available, we're adding those funds in, as well as some funds from an old expired Youth and Family Community Partnership contract. And then we're moving some funds for some of the funds from the existing Youth and Family Community Partnership contract onto this contract as well. So we're going to kind of slowly sunset the other master contract off, and so we have everything just on one.
Right. Questions? Ma'am.
I just, through the chair, I just want to be clear, because I don't think I was on public safety back then, but HHS has a master contract as well. And we contract, it's a master contract for different services. Is this the same contract, or is this?
No, this is a separate contract. These are residential services for juvenile court youth only. Very often, the services for juvenile court youth, while they may on the surface look similar to services for other youth in the county, they're really different, and the best practice says that you're really not supposed to mix those populations, because you tend to create more criminals. So it's best to service them. The best practice is to service high-risk youth with high-risk youth and not mix them with low-risk youth, because it makes the low-risk youth high risk.
Mischievous behavior.
Yes.
Criminals know how to
Mr.
deal.
Greenspan.
Great, thank you. So as I understand, you're taking a number of master contract agreements and molding them into one?
We're taking the two. So we have two that are current, one for what we call traditional, one we call for YFCP, or Youth and Family Community Partnership. We're going to meld them together. So that's the change of scope of services. So since this is a master, there's an exhibit with each vendor in the end. And so we just took the services from the Youth and Family Community Partnership one, because there's 7 providers on Youth and Family Community Partnership. There's 18 on traditional residential. But all of the 7 of YFCP are on residential. So we just added the scope of services onto their exhibit in the back of the contract. So yeah, we're melding that in.
So at the end of the day, the net impact on the budget is zero.
Correct.
Okay, and let me ask you this, since I mentioned the budget, why, since we're only 2-3 weeks into the current year, why was this not addressed during the budget discussions as far as combining these at that time?
Well, the court decided to meld them together, but our budget was one number.
Okay,
So it wasn't, in the previous budget, so not this budget, but in the previous budget, prior to that, we actually had a separate index code for youth and family community partnership, and we sunsetted that so that the two current residential ones are on the same index code currently. They just are separate contracts.
okay, all right. So there's no impact, this is more administrative on your end to give you flexibility.
Absolutely.
To move money as youth
Right.
offenders are being, their treatment is being assessed.
Correct, correct.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Hairston.
Just a quick question. In the ordinance, it has 4 providers that would not reasonably anticipate for there to be an increase for. Is that because they don't offer part of services that the new master contract will have, or
Yeah, so
will offer? Rather?
right, so when we sent the RFP out for services, we list all the different kinds of residential services we need. So there's obviously separated by gender, there's services for sex offenders or substance abuse or general offender or, mental health issues or what have you. So then the vendors respond and say, well, this is the program or programs that we offer. So that way we get sort of the array, the types of services that we need so that whatever kind of youth comes in with whatever needs, we can match them with a service. Does that make sense?
It does. So Carrington Youth Academy, for example.
Correct.
They just may not offer part of the service that the master contract is looking for. The RFP.
Their services, and this is off the top of my head, I believe they do what we call a general offender residential. And that's not to say that they don't offer, substance abuse or mental health or whatever, but that's not really the main focus of what they're providing as a residential provider.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Germano.
This basically is kind of the same question, but why would you highlight these 4 and just put what they're approved for? I mean, is there something more that we should be reading into this?
I'm sorry, forgive me, I don't know which 4 we're talking about.
The Carrington, Rite of Passage, Safe House Ministries, Tri-State Youth Authority. I mean, you've got all these others. It's not to exceed a certain amount.
Right.
But this one, you're saying no funding increase. Why wouldn't you just put, why do you have that category?
Oh, so for Carrington Youth Academy, I can sort of address them separately. We do have youth that are in the Youth and Family Community Partnership portion, but I don't believe currently we have any youth that are in the traditional residential. So whatever funds that we put in and sort of assign to that program originally, there's still plenty of funds there so it's not like there's no funds under that, it's just no additional funds are needed. Rite of Passage, I could tell you that we were able to get funds through the Targeted Reclay Program through the state. So our first line of funding would be the state grant before we would address these funds for the youth that would go to that program. Tri-State, we have not had any youth there yet. And I can't tell you why not. We probably, the best I can surmise is that there's been no youth that have come in that have really been a good match for that program. And the 4th program was?
Safe House Ministries.
Safe House is a very specific program. They provide sex offender services for girls. So it's the kind of program that we don't get very often, but when you get it, when you have that need, you have to be able to address that need and place a youth there. We don't get a lot of girls that are sex offenders, but we have had them in the past, and there is, you have to be able to sort of move quickly if that is the need of a girl as a sex offender. So like I said, it's not that those individual suffixes and those programs don't have any funds that are assigned to them. It's that the funds that were assigned originally are still able to cover the services that we may need. And then the other piece of that is the beauty of the master contract is the flexibility. So we sort of guesstimate how much we want to, what I call, assign to each of the programs, or each of the vendors, I should say, not even the programs, ahead of time. And then if our usage on one program goes up high, that we can very simply through a decert recert process sort of take money from one of the other program that's not being used as highly and move it to the other program to cover the invoices. So that's the beauty of the master contract program. So it doesn't mean that we won't need funds for a certain program, but it allows us, without having to go back and amend, which is sort of where we were maybe 5 or 7 years ago, is that each one of these vendors had a separate contract, and we had to come back each time when the not to exceed amount changed and reduce this one and increase this one and what have you. So.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
I guess.
Okay.
Ms. Conwell.
Just going back to our earlier point, so how do we make sure, you were saying this master contract is different than our HHS with foster care, so how some of these organizations are in our HHS foster care where we send our kids, how do we make sure that those children don't commingle?
That's up to the vendor, and usually it's different units and different programming. And the other thing is that there's levels of care that are provided, and our youth are generally, I think there's 6 levels of care. So foster care is the first level, and we don't provide foster care through juvenile court. We provide level 3, 4, 5, and I think 6 and 7, which are the most severe at times. So each level of care is sort of a different program, and the vendor knows not to sort of commingle those youth with each other. So if we have a youth and that we are exploring residential services for, what we do is we send out requests to all of the programs that match those youth needs, and we say, do you have space? Are you able to accommodate this youth? And so they know who the youth are, who's getting out when, and we'll have a bed, but maybe not until next week, or we don't have space right now, or sometimes they come and actually interview the youth to see if that youth will fit in with the current youth that they have, to make sure that they're not commingling youth, and to make sure that the youth that they have on a unit or a cottage or however they're divided up will actually, everyone can sort of therapeutically take advantage of the program.
So these are the lower level offenders that really shouldn't commingle at juvenile court are placed in these residential services to commingle with foster children.
No.
Okay.
So the juvenile court youth don't, as by practice, that we don't want them to commingle with any CFS placed youth at all. That's with any programming. That's just not in concert with what is best practice, that you really want to keep high-risk youth with high-risk youth and low-risk youth with low-risk youth.
Anything for Mr. Germano?
Mr. Chairman, I'm just wondering, who decides
I already got it.
who goes where? Is it judges, or is it doctors, or?
So there's a whole placement planning practice or procedure that we go through. So when when a youth is on probation, almost all youth are on probation or have a probation experience prior to them being put into a residential placement. And that probation officer will talk with their manager and say, I think this is a good youth for residential placement, and they put them into what we call placement planning. And they put together all of the documentation, whether it's any assessments or notes from services or anything that social history of that youth, all of that information, and it goes into placement planning, where we have an alternative case plan, which is a group of folks, cross-discipline at the court, who review the case and either make recommendations and say, you know what, before you go to placement, you need to try this service in the community or this service in the community, because we always want to keep kids in the least restrictive environment. So sometimes we actually send them back and say, try this program or try this first. If they say, yeah, I think maybe this is a good candidate for residential placement, the ultimate decision is the judge. And so a number of hearings are set up, an initial hearing, which then allows the youth to proceed through placement planning procedures. And then after the youth has gone through ACP, alternative case plan, and everything is in order, we've put out a number of feelers and say which programs are available, and then a recommendation is made to the judge, and the judge makes the final decision of which program that youth is going to go to based on what's available.
So is it case managers, or do they have professional credentials, or? I'm just wondering if there's any possibility of steering to these different facilities, and some have got $1 million, some have got 200,000.
So the alternative case plan process includes a number of folks that are mental health professionals. The presentation of the case is done by the probation officer and the manager. And it is it's like a match. It's sort of like, matching the needs of the youth, which are then outlined through this committee, with what the different providers provide in their services. I'm not going to say that, if you know a program better, and you're able to speak to that individual program better than one that you're not using. But I also can say that we're not going to continually send youth back to programs that we're not getting successful outcomes from.
So it's mental health professionals that are making the decision?
They're part of the committee, yes. So there's probation officer. I'm trying to think who else is on it. By and large, yeah, they're folks in the court who are either master's level or I'm trying to think if we have a doctoral level person on that committee now, and folks that have been working with youth for a long time. And then often we bring in, if a community-based vendor has done an assessment on a youth, and they come in and they speak to sort of what the youth's needs are, what the situation is in their family. They often come in and speak to the case as well. So it's sort of a multidiscipline presentation of the case.
Okay.
Little homework for you.
Sure.
I see my favorite, the Glen Mills School, on here.
Yes.
And I won't belabor my thoughts of that. But if you could put together for each one of these, obviously not naming the name of the youth that's been placed there, could you give us an example for each one, why they were placed and what the alternative placements were? Say one goes to Applewood but could have gone to Belfair and possibly Cornell, as to why one went out over the other. I think that'll help get us to where Mr. Germana is going. Give us an idea how that's picked. I still really question why we're sending any youth outside of Ohio, but that's just my personal thought. So if you could do that for us, I think
Sure.
that would be helpful.
So why a youth was placed where they were and where else was explored?
The
Is that what-
process.
In the process?
X came in,
Okay,
here were the problems, here were the alternatives, why the first one was chosen.
sure.
Just
Not
give
a
us an
problem.
idea of how that works,
Got it.
okay? Mm-hmm. Anything else? And again, because of the time, I see this is necessary to move forward.
Yes, please.
So I'll accept a motion for Resolution 2016-0019 to the full council at our next meeting under suspension.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Thank you. All right. Miscellaneous business, anyone? Other public comment?
No, Mr. Chair, no one is signed in.
Thank you.